created by Carl Faberge in 1887 for the Russian royal family, it was seized during the revolution and sold by the Soviets. It vanished for half a century.
A man walks into a scrap metal shop carrying what he thinks is just another piece of old gold, ready to melt it down for a quick profit. But what he actually held in his hands was worth $33 million and had been missing for nearly a century. How did one of the world's most precious treasures end up forgotten in a kitchen drawer? And what secrets does this discovery reveal about the lost world of Imperial Russia? The birth of a royal tradition. To understand just how incredible this discovery was, we need to travel back to Imperial Russia in 1885. The country was ruled by Tsar Alexander III, a man who understood the power of grand gestures. After surviving an assassination attempt that killed his father, Alexander knew that symbols of strength and continuity mattered more than ever. The Romanovs' extravagant royal Easter egg tradition began with Tsar Alexander III in 1885. Alexander was then in the 5th year of his reign, having succeeded his father, Alexander II, who had been killed by bomb-wielding assassins. Easter was the most important religious celebration in Russia, and Alexander wanted to give his wife something that would capture both his love for her and the glory of their empire. The man he chose for this task was Peter Carl Faberge, a master jeweler whose workshop had already gained a reputation for creating pieces that pushed the boundaries of what was possible with gold, gems, and enamel. Of Huguenot descent and a son of a St. Petersburg jeweler, Faberge was trained in St. Petersburg, and had inherited a business that served wealthy clients across Europe. Alexander III ordered the first Faberge egg as an Easter gift for his wife, Empress Maria Fyodorovna, in 1885. The egg, made of gold covered with white enamel, opened to reveal a matte yellow gold yolk, which contained a gold hen with ruby eyes. This first egg might seem simple compared to later creations, but it established a tradition that would define luxury for the next 32 years. What made the egg special is its surprise element. When Maria Fyodorovna opened it, she found layer after layer of treasures hidden inside. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. An egg that contained other eggs, each one more precious than the last. The Empress was so delighted that on the 1st May, the Emperor assigned Faberge the title Goldsmith by special appointment to the imperial crown, setting the stage for an annual tradition that would produce some of the most valuable objects ever created. The House of Faberge was more like a laboratory, where art and engineering came together in ways that had never been attempted before. Peter Carl Faberge surrounded himself with the finest craftsmen in Europe, each one a specialist in their field. There were gem setters who could place diamonds so precisely that they seemed to float in space, enamelers who created colors so pure they looked like liquid light, and mechanical engineers who built clockwork mechanisms smaller than a thumbnail. Under the visionary leadership of Peter Carl Faberge, the House of Faberge expanded its artistic repertoire far beyond the famous imperial Easter eggs, but the eggs remained their masterpiece. Each year, the challenge grew greater. How do you surpass perfection? How do you surprise someone who owns everything? The answer lay in innovation. Faberge's team developed new techniques for working with gold, creating alloys that produced colors ranging from white to deep rose. They pioneered methods of applying enamel so thin it was translucent, allowing light to pass through and create an inner glow. Most importantly, they became masters of mechanical surprise. Eggs that opened in unexpected ways, contained moving parts, or revealed multiple hidden chambers. The workshop operated under strict secrecy. Each egg was a state secret until the moment it was presented. Even the craftsmen working on different parts of the same egg didn't always know what they were creating. This level of security was a necessity. In a world where royal gifts could influence international relations, keeping the surprises secret was essential. Peter Carl Faberge was an unusual figure in the world of luxury goods. Unlike many jewelers who simply assembled expensive materials, he was an artist with a vision that extended far beyond commercial success. Born into a family of jewelers, he had been exposed to the finest craftsmanship from childhood. But his ambitions reached much higher than simply continuing the family business. When he took over the workshop from his father, Faberge immediately began experimenting with new styles and techniques. He studied the great art collections of Europe, spending time in museums and private galleries, learning from masters of painting, sculpture, and decorative arts. This broad education showed in his work, as Faberge eggs were miniature works of art that combined elements from multiple disciplines. Faberge understood something crucial about his royal clients, that they weren't impressed by expense alone. The Russian court was surrounded by gold and jewels every day. What captured their attention was originality, technical brilliance, and emotional resonance. Each egg needed to tell a story, commemorate an event, or express a sentiment that couldn't be communicated any other way. The relationship between Faberge and the imperial family went beyond simple business transactions. He became their confidant in matters of taste, helping them express their personalities through objects that would outlast their reigns. When Alexander III died and was succeeded by his son Nicholas II, the tradition continued seamlessly. Faberge adapted his style to match the new Tsar's personality while maintaining the high standards that had made the eggs legendary. But as the 20th century began, these remarkable creations reached new levels of technical skill and artistic detail. Imperial treasures in a changing world. By the early 1900s, the Faberge workshop was producing eggs that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. These were mechanical marvels that incorporated clockwork, photography, miniature sculptures, and even early forms of automation. Some eggs contained tiny trains that actually moved along miniature tracks. Others held cameras that could take real photographs, and several featured complex musical mechanisms that played entire compositions. As many as 69 Tsarist Russia-era eggs were created, of which 61 are currently known to have survived. Virtually all of the original first edition eggs were manufactured under the supervision of Peter Carl Faberge between 1885 and 1917. The 50 imperial eggs represented the pinnacle of this production. But Faberge also created eggs for other wealthy clients, including members of the Rothschild family and other European aristocrats. Each imperial egg was unique, designed specifically for the occasion when it would be presented. Some commemorated military victories, others celebrated the birth of royal children, and many simply expressed the love between Alexander III and his wife, or later between Nicholas II and Alexandra. The eggs became a calendar of Imperial Russian history, capturing the hopes, fears, and dreams of a dynasty that seemed permanent but was actually approaching its end. The technical complexity of the later eggs was staggering. The Trans-Siberian Railway egg contained a working model of the famous train, complete with a mechanism that allowed it to move along its track. The coronation egg held a perfect miniature replica of the imperial coach used in Nicholas II's coronation ceremony. In 1887, for the third Easter of their tradition, Alexander III commissioned what would become known as the Third Imperial Egg. The Third Imperial Egg of 1887, designed by the Finnish goldsmith August Holmström, enclosed a Vacheron Constantin watch. This egg represented a perfect balance between the simplicity of the first egg and the mechanical complexity that would characterize later creations. Standing just over 3 inches tall, the egg was crafted from solid gold and decorated with sapphires, diamonds, and intricate enamel work. The design was elegant in its restraint, rather than overwhelming the viewer with elaborate decorations. It drew attention through perfect proportions and flawless execution. 3 sapphire cabochons were suspended from golden garlands that wrapped around the egg's surface, creating a sense of movement even when the piece was completely still. The real magic, however, was hidden inside. When opened through a mechanism activated by pressing a diamond, the egg revealed a tiny Vacheron Constantin watch, one of the finest timepieces in the world. The watch was a work of art in its own way, with a gold case, white enamel dial, and diamond-set hands that moved with perfect precision. This combination of outer beauty and inner surprise was what made Faberge eggs so compelling. The viewer experienced multiple levels of discovery. First, the overall impact of the egg's design, then the pleasure of figuring out how to open it, and finally, the delight of discovering what was hidden inside. The choice to include a Vacheron Constantin watch was significant. These Swiss timepieces were considered the finest in the world, and incorporating one into the egg sent a message about the imperial family's appreciation for excellence wherever it was found. Revolution and chaos. The golden age of Faberge eggs came to an abrupt end in 1917 when revolution swept through Russia. The Bolsheviks, who overthrew Tsar Nicholas II, had no use for imperial treasures. In fact, they saw them as symbols of everything that was wrong with the old regime. The new government faced immediate practical problems. They needed foreign currency to stabilize their economy, and they had palaces full of valuable objects that served no purpose in their revolutionary society. After the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks nationalized the House of Faberge, and the Faberge family fled to Switzerland, where Peter Carl Faberge died in 1920. The workshop that had created wonders for over 30 years was shut down overnight. The craftsmen scattered to other countries, taking their skills, but leaving behind the specialized tools and techniques that had made their work possible. The imperial collection was systematically liquidated. Objects that had taken months or years to create were sold quickly and often carelessly. Many buyers didn't understand what they were purchasing. They saw gold and jewels, but they missed the artistry and historical significance. Others were well aware of the value, but took advantage of the chaos to acquire treasures at absurdly low prices. The third imperial egg disappeared during this period of confusion. The object was listed for sale, but never reliably tracked afterward, becoming one of several imperial eggs whose location was unknown. For decades, historians and collectors speculated about what had happened to these missing pieces. Some believed they had been destroyed, others thought they were hidden in private collections, and a few optimists hoped they might still be discovered someday. The loss of these eggs represented more than just the disappearance of valuable objects. They were tangible links to a world that had vanished completely, witnesses to conversations and celebrations that could never be repeated. Each missing egg was like a lost page from a book that told the story of Imperial Russia's final decades. For nearly a century, the third imperial egg lived a life that would have been unimaginable to its creators. Instead of gracing imperial palaces or royal collections, it passed through the hands of dealers, collectors, and eventually ordinary people who had no idea what they possessed. The egg that had once been presented with ceremony to an empress was bought and sold like any other antique, its true identity forgotten. The path it took during these decades remains largely unknown. It may have been sold multiple times, passed down through families, or stored in attics and basements where its beauty went unappreciated. What's certain is that it somehow made its way from Russia to the American Midwest, a journey that would have seemed impossible in 1887 when it was first created. During this period, the art world was slowly awakening to the significance of Faberge's work. Museums began acquiring pieces for their collections, and collectors started paying serious attention to objects that had once been dismissed as merely expensive trinkets. Books were written, exhibitions were organized, and gradually the public began to understand that these eggs were masterpieces of decorative art. In 2011, researchers made a breakthrough in the search for missing eggs. His search brought up a 2011 article in Britain's Daily Telegraph newspaper describing a frantic search for the object, the third Imperial Easter egg made by Faberge for the Russian royal family and estimated to be worth £20 million. They had identified the egg in a 1964 auction catalog, providing the first solid lead to its whereabouts in decades. This discovery energized collectors and historians, but none of them could have predicted where the egg would actually turn up. The scrap metal dealer's discovery. The man who found the third Imperial egg was everything you wouldn't expect in an art collector. He was a scrap metal dealer from the American Midwest who made his living buying objects at estate sales and flea markets, then selling the valuable materials they contained. His business model was simple. He bought items that contained gold, silver, or other precious metals, then sold these materials to refineries for slightly more than he had paid. It provided a steady income for someone who understood how to spot valuable materials in unlikely places. In 2012, he attended an estate sale where he noticed a small golden object that caught his attention. A man unwittingly purchased the third Imperial egg made of solid 18-karat gold at a Midwest antique shop for $14,000 with a plan to melt it down for scrap metal. The price was steep compared to what he usually spent. It was a big investment that needed a strong return to make any profit. The egg's weight suggested it was made of solid gold, which gave him confidence that he could recover his investment even if he had to melt it down. He calculated that the gold content alone should yield around $500 in profit, enough to justify the risk. This kind of quick calculation was second nature to him, and he had to make dozens of similar decisions every week, and most of the time his instincts were correct. However, when he approached scrap metal buyers, none of them were willing to offer him the price he needed to make a profit. The offers were disappointing, far below what he had calculated based on the object's weight and apparent gold content. Faced with the prospect of a significant loss, he decided to wait and look for other options. For months, the egg sat in his kitchen, a constant reminder of a deal that had gone wrong. Every time he looked at it, he probably wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The $14,000 investment was significant for him, and the failure to find a buyer was frustrating and financially stressful. Then, one evening in 2013, he decided to take a closer look at the small watch inside the egg. He had noticed the name Vacheron Constantin engraved on its face, but hadn't given it much thought. Out of curiosity, boredom, or perhaps desperation, he decided to Google the name to see if it meant anything. Years later, he read of the missing Faberge egg, contacted Faberge experts, and the egg was authenticated and subsequently valued at an estimated $33 million. That simple Google search changed his life forever. The results brought up articles about luxury watches, but more importantly, they led him to the 2011 Telegraph article about the missing third Imperial Faberge egg. As he read the article and compared the descriptions to the object sitting in his kitchen, the magnitude of his discovery began to dawn on him. The dimensions matched, the materials were identical, and most convincingly, the Vacheron Constantin watch was exactly what the article described as the egg's hidden surprise. The emotional impact of this realization must have been overwhelming. In a matter of minutes, He had gone from thinking he owned a failed investment to understanding that he possessed something worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The stress of the lost money was instantly replaced by the even greater stress of owning something incredibly valuable and historically significant. Realizing the potential significance of his discovery, the man reached out to Kieran McCarthy, a leading expert on Faberge objects. McCarthy had spent decades studying these pieces and was one of the few people in the world qualified to authenticate an imperial egg. The photos the man sent were intriguing, but McCarthy had seen many false alarms over the years. Hopeful owners who were convinced they had found treasures that turned out to be reproductions or unrelated objects. Still, there was something about these particular photos that caught McCarthy's attention. The quality of the craftsmanship was exceptional. The proportions looked correct, and the Vacheron Constantin watch was exactly what should have been found inside the third imperial egg. Skeptical but intrigued, McCarthy agreed to meet with the finder. When the man arrived at McCarthy's office in London, his nervousness was immediately apparent. He understood that he was carrying something potentially worth millions of dollars, but he also knew that he might be about to learn that his hopes were unfounded. McCarthy later described how the man's mouth was dry with fear as he presented his evidence. The moment McCarthy saw the egg in person, his doubts evaporated. Every detail was perfect. McCarthy's expertise allowed him to appreciate details that would have been invisible to most observers. The way the gold was worked, the specific techniques used in applying the enamel, and the overall aesthetic were all consistent with Faberge's workshop in 1887. Perhaps most convincingly, the wear patterns on the piece were exactly what would be expected from an object that was over 100 to 25 years old. With the authentication complete, the world was about to witness one of the most remarkable art discoveries in modern history. A brief moment in the spotlight. Once the authentication was complete, arrangements were made for the egg to be displayed publicly for only the second time in its history. The first exhibition was in 1902 at a show of the Russian royal family's collection in St. Petersburg. Now, more than a century later, it would be shown at Wartsky Jewelers in London, giving the public a chance to see one of the world's most famous rediscoveries. News outlets struggled to convey the improbability of what had happened. A man who had intended to melt down the object for scrap metal had instead discovered one of the art world's most sought-after treasures. The contrast between the humble circumstances of the find and the imperial grandeur of the object created a story that seemed almost too remarkable to be true. During its brief public display, the egg drew crowds of visitors who wanted to witness what many considered one of the greatest art discoveries of the modern era. Viewing the piece in person revealed details that no photograph could capture. The authentication of the third imperial egg raised fascinating questions about how we determine the value of art objects. The egg was authenticated and subsequently valued at an estimated $33 million. But this figure represented more than just the cost of the materials and labor involved in its creation. It reflected the egg's historical significance, its rarity, and the dramatic story of its rediscovery. The discovery of the third imperial egg renewed interest in the fate of the other missing pieces from the imperial collection. All 6 of the missing imperial eggs belonged to Maria Feodorovna, suggesting that they disappeared as a group during the chaos following the revolution. This gives hope that they might still be together somewhere, waiting to be discovered by another lucky finder. Each missing egg has its own story and its own unique features that would make it identifiable to experts. Some are described in surviving documentation from Faberge's workshop. Others are known only from brief mentions in imperial records. The challenge for treasure hunters is that these descriptions are often vague, and without photographs or detailed drawings, it can be difficult to know exactly what to look for. The search for missing Faberge objects has become a specialized field within art history and collecting. Experts maintain databases of known pieces, study auction records going back decades, and follow up on reports from around the world. Sometimes these leads pan out, as with the third Imperial egg, but more often they result in disappointment. In 2022, excitement arose when U.S. authorities may have found a Faberge egg sitting around on a Russian oligarch's seized $300 million yacht, but subsequent examination revealed it to be a forgery. These false alarms are common in the world of Faberge collecting, where the enormous values involved create strong incentives for both honest mistakes and deliberate deception. The continuing search for missing eggs reflects something deeper than simple treasure hunting. These objects represent tangible connections to a world that has been lost forever. Finding them is like recovering missing pages from a history book, each one adding to our understanding of Imperial Russian culture and the extraordinary craftsmanship of Faberge's workshop. The rediscovery of the third Imperial egg has implications that extend far beyond the art world. It demonstrates how valuable objects can hide in plain sight, overlooked by experts and collectors who assume that everything important has already been found and catalogued. The fact that something worth $33 million could sit unrecognized in a kitchen for months suggests that other treasures might be waiting to be discovered in equally unlikely places. The story also highlights the role of chance in art discovery. Without the failed attempt to sell the egg for scrap metal, without the curious Google search, and without the Telegraph article that provided the crucial information, this masterpiece might still be sitting in obscurity. These coincidences remind us that some of the most important discoveries in art history have depended on luck as much as expertise. For the art market, the discovery raised questions about authentication and provenance. How many other significant pieces might be circulating without proper identification? How can experts distinguish between genuine discoveries and sophisticated forgeries? The third Imperial egg was authenticated relatively easily because of its unique features and excellent documentation, but other pieces might not be so straightforward. The continuing hunt. Today, the search for the remaining missing Faberge eggs continues with renewed energy. The success of the third Imperial egg discovery has inspired both professional treasure hunters and amateur enthusiasts to look more carefully at objects in their own collections. Auction houses, antique dealers, and estate sale companies are paying closer attention to small golden objects that might once have been dismissed as merely decorative. Modern technology has made the search easier in some ways and more difficult in others. Online databases and digital photography allow experts to share information and compare objects quickly, but the same technology has also made it easier to create convincing forgeries. The internet has connected collectors and researchers around the world, but it has also enabled scammers to reach more potential victims. The psychological appeal of the hunt remains strong. There's something irresistible about the idea that extraordinary treasures might be hiding in ordinary places, waiting for the right person to recognize their significance. Professional searchers use systematic approaches, studying historical records, following paper trails through auction houses and estate sales, and building networks of contacts who might encounter relevant objects. But, as the third Imperial egg proved, sometimes the most important discoveries come from unexpected directions. The story has also inspired renewed interest in other types of lost art. If a Faberge egg could resurface after nearly a century, what other masterpieces might be waiting to be rediscovered? Museums and private collectors have begun reviewing their collections more carefully, looking for pieces that might have been misidentified or undervalued. Understanding the egg's significance requires appreciating the context in which it was created. Imperial Russia, was a society where enormous wealth coexisted with grinding poverty, where technological innovation flourished alongside rigid social traditions, and where artistic achievement reached extraordinary heights, even as political tensions threatened the entire system. The Faberge workshop represented the best aspects of this world: the commitment to excellence, the willingness to invest time and resources in creating beauty, and the collaboration between artists, craftsmen, and patrons that could produce objects of lasting significance. The eggs were expressions of values and aspirations that transcended their immediate function. The eggs' survival through revolution, exile, and decades of obscurity also speaks to the resilience of human creativity. Despite the dramatic changes that swept away the world of its creation, the object itself endured, carrying its history and beauty forward to new generations who could appreciate it in different ways. Today, when mass production and digital reproduction have made unique objects increasingly rare, the Faberge eggs remind us of what can be accomplished when human skill, artistic vision, and unlimited resources come together in pursuit of perfection. They represent a standard of craftsmanship that may never be equaled again. The success of the third Imperial egg discovery has energized the community of collectors, researchers, and treasure hunters who continue searching for the remaining missing pieces. Each success proves that the impossible can happen, that objects given up for lost can resurface in the most unexpected circumstances. The search techniques continue to evolve as new technologies become available. High-resolution photography, chemical analysis, and detailed documentation make it easier to authenticate discoveries and distinguish genuine pieces from reproductions. Future finds may come from similar circumstances where objects have been passed down without recognition of their significance. But they might also emerge from more systematic searches, as museums and private collectors use improved methods to research and catalog their holdings. The continuing fascination with these discoveries reflects something fundamental about human nature: our desire to uncover hidden treasures, to solve historical mysteries, and to connect with the past through physical objects that have survived across generations. The third Imperial egg has shown that these connections are still possible, that the past isn't as distant or inaccessible as it sometimes seems. Whether the remaining missing eggs will ever be found remains an open question. Some may have been destroyed, others may remain hidden in private collections, and still others might be sitting unrecognized in the same kinds of ordinary places where the third Imperial egg spent its years of obscurity. The only certainty is that the search will continue, driven by the hope that somewhere another remarkable discovery is waiting to be made. The story of the third Imperial Faberge egg proves that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. From imperial palaces to a kitchen drawer, this $33 million masterpiece survived revolution, war, and nearly a century of obscurity before a simple Google search changed everything. What other priceless artifacts might be sitting unrecognized in attics, estate sales, or antique shops around the world? Share your thoughts about this incredible discovery and let us know if you think the remaining missing eggs will ever be found.